Hi, so I'm Blizz Tank. I play competitive Team Fortress 2 Pyro, and I think there's always been a bit of a lack of mechanical understanding and refined technique when it comes to the usage of the thermal thruster, and that's something I'd like to talk about. I will say I got some initial inspiration for the idea of this video from people like Lister, and then with his like thermal thruster video covering the Dragon's Fury in relation to it, and just sort of talking about it in a sort of sense through that lens. I also took a bit of inspiration from the old spy videos that would talk about like trick stab guides and whatnot. But I will say, uh, I'm very professional, right? So I will say though that I think the Backburner is a much stronger fit for the role of a primary for the thermal thruster, and I'm gonna start elaborating on why. So the first thing to know about the thermal thruster is that no matter if you have it actively out or not, no matter if it's like just passively in your inventory or not, you have a permanent plus 60% knockback increased from all sources. Now, what does this mean to you? This means mini sentries send you flying around. Level 3s are your death. And heavies, well, it depends on how much money you're going to send their way. You know, sometimes heavies might take bribes, but other times they're just not going to be your friend. But it basically means that every source of damage in the game is a massive opportunity, especially though something like a Pyro Airblast. And that's something I'll go and get around to demonstrating more when I showcase the specific techniques later on. And I will say, like, I will have timestamps for this. You'll be able to see when there are specific like specific techniques being showcased, if that's more of what you're interested in. So without further ado, I'm going to get right into it. So the detonator is a pretty good weapon, but the 60% increased knockback just turns the thermal thruster into what's essentially a dopamine ride. You go flying around from everything and anything, and the world basically becomes your playground. Every source is an opportunity, and you just go crazy. And in a competitive sense, it doesn't really translate in the same way. But in casual, I feel like honestly Thermal Thruster is just a lot more effective to use. Just due to how chaotic and high tempo the game is, the detonator's always been better at creating your own chaos. It's less choreographed. You don't have to use the secondary for it. It's always an option. But then with Thermal Thruster, you always need a certain level of chaos for it to work, right? Otherwise you're just gonna get shot out of the sky. But then in a casual environment, there's obviously much less attention being paid to little things like a jumping pyro, and you're going to be able to get away with a lot more. So honestly, I never really feel a time where I never really feel like there's a bad time to be running the thermal thruster in casual unless there's just a ton of level 3s or snipers or heavies that are just killing you and ruining your fun. It's just when everything's an option for mobility, including the enemy players, you're going to see some crazy stuff, and it's going to be really flashy and fun. And you just don't really get that sort of high tempo experience from any other class in the game, including regular Pyro or Detonator, right? So, the usual main accepted options when it comes to running the thermal thrusters primaries are the stock flamethrower. It's always going to be pretty solid. You have to forgive the coughing fuck. Anyways, so the stock flamethrower, it's very good for repositioning enemy players, and something you can do a lot of the time with the thermal thruster is just jump, aim downwards, and just flick your mouse upwards, and you'll send enemy players absolutely flying up. And you can normally do that a fair bit, but with the thermal thruster equipped, you have so much momentum, and momentum enhances the shit out of your airblasts. So it's just like, it's crazy. So that can be really fun, right? But then if you're not on something where it's like a lot of areas that you can knock enemies off of, or if you're not just like having the airblast be the main focus of your play, then you're a lot better suited to doing something like the Dragon's Fury or the Backburner, I'd say. Now, the important thing to note with the thermal thruster is that it's an inconsistent weapon, and something like the Dragon's Fury on principle benefits from consistency. You want to be chipping down at one target, you want to be able to focus on one target, and if you're focusing on one target, that means you're not using the thermal thruster to its full potential as a tool of chaos. You're getting tunnel visioned, and you're not finding the best opportunities to be putting yourself in. You just end up overcommitting to one target. The Backburner, on the other hand, very much benefits from inconsistent situations and from you constantly rotating around and just finding yourself repositioned by everything. The main purpose of the thermal thruster is to close the gap, and so you don't really need another weapon to close the gap for you. It does it so good that you don't need anything else. And I'd say that really comes down to the knockback. It's basically a passive secondary in that sense. You just gain the best surfs known to humankind. So, you just fly in. There isn't really any need for a longer range option like the Dragon's Fury, and as I'll demonstrate later, yes, there is knockback from landing next to enemies with something like the thermal thruster. Like, you're gonna knock enemies back, but if you stall your movement midair, you'll find yourself dropping right behind enemies in the perfect spot where it's like it doesn't bounce them forward, and you have the perfect criticals right there, and you can critical amongst like a huge group of enemies. And so what you usually want to do is find a group of enemies already distracted by a fight, or recommit from a high ground and sort of fight from above, and get an initial burst of huge damage on multiple people as the flames pass through everybody. And so this works out really well on something like Payload. Again, it's like, yeah, I sort of see where your lister is coming from, but that's with the Dragon's Fury. With the Backburner, it benefits from people being clumped up together because you're always focusing on multiple targets. You're always trying to divide targets. And if you jump into a huge group of enemies in the middle of them, it becomes much harder for them to deal with and react, and it makes them take away attention from everything else. And honestly, I'd say at a certain point, it's not so much about finding people to be unaware, right? Like, you're not always, especially in more in competitive environments, you're not always going to encounter enemies that aren't aware. But it's all but what makes it work, even in competitive, is the ability to time it and the ability to find those little times where the enemies are out of position. It's not about awareness. It's about positioning. If you see one enemy is sort of split off from the rest of the team, or if you're able to sort of physically get in the way and instantly get a kill or high amounts of damage onto them, then it's the perfect opportunity to launch yourself in with the thermal thruster and use the Backburner for massive critical damages. Even more than that, though, the jetpack is all about tempo. The Backburner benefits the most out of any pyro weapon from tempo, whereas the Dragon's Fury is more of your control option. You want to be taking controlled engagements where you don't get hurt by the slower repressurization rate of your flamethrower. And for those who don't know, basically that's how often you can airblast. So let's take something like the Backburner. You land in the middle of a group of enemies, you backburn, maybe you're going to commit about 100 ammo to flaming. That leaves still 2 airblasts, and that means you can still reflect while you're flaming. You still have so much control of the situation, but then you also have the ability to just decide, hey, this fight isn't worth taking, and you can stall your movement just like this. And just kill your momentum and land right behind in the perfect position to get critical hits on somebody. Again, I'll be getting more into the technical, like, specifics later and just showcasing what you can do and how. But just on principle, it's just like the Backburner synergizes so well compared to the Dragon's Fury here. And I'd still think it comes down to playstyle, but yeah, but the thing is, when you have all of that chaos, it's really important to have a consistent flow, right? You don't want to have your pacing ruined by the repressurization rate or just by accidentally missing a shot. Whereas with the Backburner, you always have consistency, and it can really throw people off to even see you airblast with the Backburner. Same thing does apply to Dragon's Fury, but there is a physical limitation on that. Whereas with the Backburner, as long as you have a source of ammo, like you're getting kills, or you have like just ammo packs around, like you're smart with your engagements, the ammo, like the reflect ammo count isn't really as much of an issue. And the thing that the jetpack allows you to do way better than any other weapon is to constantly reposition, rotate, and put yourself in a position where you're either on the side of the enemy team, directly up behind them, or just above them in the perfect spot to land, literally right behind them, while they're taking fights with other people and can't really turn around. And it's just really good for finding those little situations where the enemy team has an issue with their positioning and where certain players are sort of getting isolated. And then with the addition of an airblast, it just greatly enhances that. And you just become this force of chaos with the Backburner. Whereas if you try and use the Dragon Sphere, you become a lot more like a soldier in a sense. And it's kind of difficult for you to outdo a soldier at their own job, I'd say. Or at the very least, there isn't as much of a point to doing it as there is to doing something more unique, like a Backburner thermal thruster play, right? And yeah, you just jump around everywhere, you constantly reposition, you have such high mobility, you surf everything, and it just ends up being this perfect environment for chaos to set root in. And chaos is always the most powerful tool of the Backburner. It's reliant on enemies being unaware, but more than that, it's reliant on them having poor positioning. And guess what? The thermal thruster does the same thing. If you learn how to use the thermal thruster well, you learn how to use the Backburner well. So it's like, on a developmental level even, there's just that inherent level of synergy and intuition that goes into it. The thermal, like, don't get me wrong, the Dragon Sphere is a good option as well, right? But it just... yeah, like I said earlier, it's just the sense of consistency, but then applied to the concept of motion. So, okay, with the Dragon Sphere, you're always focusing on one target. You're aiming at that one person or those few people, right? You have to sort of center your mouse and your mouse movement around them. But guess what? Your mouse movement is what defines your thermal thruster jumps. You always want to be putting the most attention and effort into how you're sort of spinning your jump, into the techniques you're using, into how you sort of land, and on visualizing that, rather than on just trying to get the perfect soldier bomb kills, essentially, as a pyro. See all that air control you get there? If you're focusing on just this one person and trying to keep your flamethrower on one of them, you're not focusing on the bigger picture and on just your ability to create chaos as a whole. With that tangent out of the way, though, it's time to talk a bit about just sort of the general principles and guidelines I would say to keep in mind when you're using the thermal thruster, especially with the Backburner, though. Again, huge circular motion. It works out. Trust me. Try it out for yourself. You'll love it. Whoosh. Okay. So the most important thing is to visualize a jump. You see my mouse placement here? Boom. I don't go very far. You see this? Look at how high I place my mouse here. I move a little bit. Boom. I go much higher. If you launch it from a position of elevation, let's say here, like once my thermal thruster comes back, you'll see something much better. Look at that distance and look at that amount of air control. You can strafe pretty much any way. You can even airblast people as you're coming down towards the ground. And if they're Ubered, or like if you're just trying to physically reposition them, you just go like that and they get sent flying super far vertically. And horizontally even a fair bit of the time, and it just removes their control. And that's what the thermal thruster is all about, really, just manipulating the enemy team. And the Backburner is so inherently tied to the concept of manipulating the enemy team and their positioning. So it's just like really intuitive. But again, I'm not going to get much farther into that here. So yes, visualize it. Just keep in mind what sort of jump you're going to get, what your crosshair placement is going to do. Generally speaking, though, if you just flick up, it's a lot better. You get so much more airtime, and that's really what defines your jumps as a thermal thruster pyro compared to something like a soldier, where it's like, you go like, boom. It's a lot less guided by terrain and a lot more guided by the player. It's like you basically permanently have the man treads on. And again, look at that circular jump. You land right behind with Backburner as they're approaching. They're not necessarily unaware, but they're in a bad position. It synergizes. I don't know how else to say it. But yes, visualization, that's the most important thing. If you don't visualize your jumps that well, you just see something like this out. Like, you just jump in. And if you just jump in, let's say there was a heavy over here, I die. If that was an enemy heavy, I die. But what you do, you use cover. So it's like, let's take something like this. You know there's enemies on this side of the rock. They know you're kind of here. You try and jump straight across, you die. So what you can do instead is jump over here, use the rocks as cover, and sort of flick your mouse gradually, get some backburner crits on them potentially, and if not, just sort of shove them back down with the airblast into your team. Again, swing it around, and imagine you're landing on the enemy team over here. And that's the most important thing by far with your jumps. Going along with that sort of visualization, you want to have a goal, right? So let's say there's an enemy player that's really, like, that your team is really struggling with a sniper, so right? So what you do, you just go super high. You can land right here, corner, Goomba, boom, they die. Just have goals in mind. Don't just jump in straight forward for the sake of it, and always be strafing and spinning around. It makes it much, much harder for you to be shot out of the sky and predicted. And sort of as I just covered, again, you really want to initiate jumps from a position of cover / where a sightline is blocked. Even just something as simple as this rock. That means basically like half the time I'm spent initially preparing the jump, they don't see necessarily unless they're taking an aggressive peek into my team. Another way this would really shine is, look over here. All of this is covered, so you just land on any enemies over here compared to just a more low ground oriented jump where you're going straight into them. You need that cover so that you're not choreographed, because if you choreograph anything, the enemy team is just going to know exactly what you're doing. They can hear the sound, and it just doesn't work out unless you can coordinate it. So what you do is you use your ability to initiate from virtually anywhere with full HP to your advantage. You act like you fulfill the role of a soldier with the power of a spy, basically. And that's the real benefit of that weapon combination there. It's so unique. You get all the mobility, you get such high damage, and of course there are downsides to it as well, right? But then it's all about just how you manage it and play around it and preparing for it. You just visualize things and it goes a lot better. See here, land on the side, land behind that scout, boom, instantly dead. I don't need to be worrying about aiming. Instead, I'm worrying about perfecting my jump. And because I'm perfecting my jumps, I'm getting good kills as well because I have the backburner equipped. And if that isn't synergy, I don't know what else could be considered synergy. But yeah, I mean, it's like, I don't know. Main benefit you have over Soldier is that they are really a lot more reliant on, one, their health pool, and two, their ability to bounce off of terrain. So if they go in just from right here, that's a pencil bomb, they have low momentum, low height, they get killed. Here, boom, you just back up a little bit, you get a good angle, and you're just going straight in. You don't need to like work around it more at all. It's not as mechanically taxing, and it can be very fun to sort of practice in that way. And it really just gives you a bit of a different way to view maps. Once you start using it, it's just like you're always looking for those little opportunities, those little angles, and that's part of what makes it so enjoyable, I'd say. Even something like this, like kind of straightest, but it's just like so far, and you can kind of curve it out as well, and it just, and again, it's initiated from a position of cover, so your odds of success are much higher. Sort of going along with that though, yeah, you want to single enemies out and have a target in mind. So let's say there's like an enemy medic right next to the scout, right? Instead of jumping right for the scout, what I'll normally do is just curve around. Wow, there actually is a medic. Okay, so you curve around while the scout overextends. The scout's taking a fight with your players on the front. Because you curve all the way around, they're not nearly as likely to have actively seen you or to change their positioning as a result of it, because you're not coming from the same angles as the rest of your team. You're coming in with full health, and if they don't turn around, they instantly die to the backburner there, basically, and you can physically manipulate them by shoving them as well. You don't have to worry about beefing your rockets on something like Soldier. You don't have just 4 rockets. It's really good and rewarding, I gotta say. But anyways, yeah, I would say usually you especially want to try and target medics, snipers. Those are just the ones that are usually the most likely to be left behind by the rest of their team, and that's definitely something you want to pick up on. But then, if they are sort of protected, you just want to find those sorts of positions that you could commit to from, where they would be distracted for a bit, where they have to look down in lanes for other threats. whereas you're relatively unique as a threat there due to the tools that you have. It's like, yes, other classes can do it to some extent, but you have a unique tool set as the Pyro, especially with the Backburner thermal thruster set. So just visualize a jump, give yourself a goal, and be decisive. Don't half commit to things. The only time you should ever really like half commit is whether it's like you start an initial jump, but then you see the enemy team, like, I don't know, like an enemy heavy turn back, an enemy sniper looking at your location, something like that. That's when you just hit your movement keys and back out. You just divert the course of your jump so that you don't die. Besides that, though, if you're throwing yourself into the enemy team, you better damn well make sure you can get something out of it, or that you have a way to live. So something that sort of helps with that is just having a plan in mind. Whenever you make one jump, you should always, and I mean always, be prepared to make a second based off the map's geometry. And that's something I can demonstrate to you in a little bit. Actually, I guess not. But basically, you go from one set of rocks to the next. Usually it'll be like high ground to just the enemy side of the map or something like that. And then something that just is generally helpful going along with that is to use little covers, like, to your advantage, especially with the Backburner passively, to just go into little alcoves, go into little, like, corners, especially if it's on, like, a wider open map. Then it's like it's really safe for you to just jump from that little cover and recommit from a better angle, or to get out entirely. And you take detonator or something, you have to cross much more of a sight line, and you can't really just get out with one jump, or if you're low health, you won't be able to in the first place. So again, it's a very unique play style. If you don't believe it for yourself, try it out, or just watch the techniques later on, and it's great. But yeah, you just want to be very fluid and deceptive with your movements. You always want to be like just changing what you do. Like, if you know Star Trek with phasers and whatnot, and the energy shields, you just want to be like modulating your plays a bit, basically. And that's something you're really kitted to with the thermal thruster. You can make all these little micro adjustments, find the perfect times to bomb, find the perfect angles, and just gradually work it out. And yeah, it's super rewarding whenever it is successful. When it's not, it's really funny. A lot less tilting than something like Soldier, because you're not as mechanically taxed, and you can replicate it easily. And you go flying. It's funny. I don't know what else to say. But yeah, redirecting your jumps, that can be pretty helpful usually, especially if it's something like this, like backwards jumps entirely. That's usually not something people really expect as much. Or if you just like head down a corner, take some cover, and then jump out entirely. Another really funny one, though, is just backwards jumping into people. It is like, it's like, okay, you're basically giving them every indication, unless you just stand there and like try and stare at them for too long in preparation for it, that you're going to be backing out. So they just sort of get a false sense of confidence. They start to prioritize other things, and then you just land right into them, basically, just straight backwards. And if you have trouble sort of learning jumps, just practicing that motion of doing a backwards jump, not really being able to aim it as much, just sort of like your controls being inversed a little bit, then it can become a lot easier to sort of just learn jumps. It really is just like practice with geometry on the maps, learn how to use high ground to your advantage, and you will have a really easy time utilizing the weapon properly. Just for the love of God, do not jump straight in straight lines at people like this. You die every time. Right, so another useful thing that you can do most of the time is just reflect as you're nearing a player like a soldier or demo man, or especially a cluster of enemies, especially if you're not confident in your ability to kill them with your flamethrower itself. Like, if you're not going to be able to get a backwards angle, you can really help your team by just slamming into the enemy team with full momentum from the back and forcing them to go into your team, especially if there's like cliff sides or something and they can force them up. They go like, whoop, whoop, all the way into your team. It's great. Try it out. Again, works really well against Ubers as well if you just want to sacrifice your life. And in general, you can really pit enemies into corners if you just ram into them with the jetpack. Again, visualize things, play smart, and it is so rewarding. And that's something that you don't really get with the Dragon Sphere. It's like, for all the fun it is, you just don't get to utilize Airblast that much. Like, you have more of it on paper, but it's so much more delayed that you can't really synchronize it with any of your plays. You can't combo it, and so it really just strikes at the natural flow and your capabilities with the tool set. Yeah, you want to be fluid, and Dragon's Fury makes you not so fluid, essentially. A lot of the time, you want to try and like just curve around as much as possible and land at like really odd angles, like little side windows or some like anything like that. Like for instance, here would be pretty decent. Another pretty good one. Again, well, I guess in this case there's only one real angle, but like usually just doing something like this, just landing from the sides as a general principle will be really effective and pretty funny to see as well. You'll usually find yourself in a position where you can just hit enemies on the side anyways with backburner crits and basically insta-kill them if they do not instantly turn around. It's a really big reaction test. And just try and use the element of surprise, duck in and out of high ground a lot, use stairs to your advantage, jump off of high ground because you can jump back onto it just as easily and always be rotating. If you find yourself in a position where you're not rotating as much, you're committing to a single fight for too long, you're going to find yourself dying because you don't have the benefit of a secondary and you're a close range combat class and you're not going to be able to use the jetpack much indoors. So just always make sure you're the one initiating things, that you're being proactive and that you're rotating around and just getting maximum value you can from the jetpack and the backburner collectively. A big benefit of the backburner in that regard is still having the ability to airblast while being able to basically instantly end more interiorly oriented fights, just with those decisive few moments of the start of the engagement, using stealth to your advantage and getting confirmed criticals on the enemies. Let's see. Yeah, a lot of the time, it's like if you start sort of jumping forward, or you like seem like you're going for a really high jump, the enemy team will expect you to go like far behind them, and especially projectile classes will be aiming like way far and up. And something you can do is just stall your movement, just reel back, so to speak, with your movement key, like hold S if you're going forward, so on and so forth. Then you can just reel your movement in, basically like you're playing fishing, and just stop yourself in your tracks, and that is really useful for one, getting backburns on people, or Dragon's Fury hits if that's your thing, making sure you're in the perfect position to end the commitment on them, or to just deceive the enemy team and sort of physically divide people, which is what you're really able to do well as a pyro, even without the thermal thruster, to be fair. So you just interject yourself in between, you get a few criticals on the medic. Medic basically dies every time. A fair bit of the time they just turn towards their teammate or in the opposite of direction of you, whereas if you land far behind, it's much easier for them to turn away, right? But then if you land in between them while their positioning is bad and while they're distracted, there is no correct play for them, because if no matter which way they turn, you can backburn them essentially. And that was something I sort of disagreed with in the video mentioned earlier. It's just like you don't really need to worry about if they're aware or not, because at a certain point they'll be aware, yeah. And as crazy as it is, when the enemy team is always expecting you to land super far behind, or to go for like these super fancy plays, or to just go straight in, a lot of the time it's just better to land behind them. And that's something, again, you'll see more in the video, like in the techniques section. But it's something I've personally practiced a fair bit. It's just not something I really get to demonstrate in competitive or use that often there. Very fun for casual environments, though, just stopping my movement, getting in between players, and just killing them. One of the really good things with the backburner is your ability to tilt. People hate just having a random pyro land behind them from whatever angle and to just instantly kill them with confirmed criticals. It's also just annoying to die to a pyro, even more to die to a flying one, and even more if they can air blast in quick succession without having to worry about a delay. Or if you can air blast and flame at the relatively same time. If you see any somewhat isolated enemies, it's really important for you to just, again, interject, jump in, kill them, and then jump out. You always want to be diving in, accomplishing something, and then diving out. Don't stick around, you're going to get killed and caught out, especially with knockback. So start de-engaging, and then that knockback becomes a very, very beneficial thing. I'll probably pull up a video actually that sort of demonstrates just how beneficial the knockback can be in a second once I finish with this section. Capitalize off the distractions and coordinate with your team. something that ends up really being beneficial even competitive, like compared to, like with a jetpack pyro compared to other classes like a soldier jumping as a distraction, is that because of your knockback, you go so much higher than soldiers or anybody or any other jumpers, and that means you remain a distraction and a potential threat for much longer, and heavies and whatnot aren't going to be able to damage you nearly as much. It can really just distract people a lot. And yeah, just make use of the knockback. And if you're really finding yourself struggling with the jetpack backburner or jetpack whatever weapon grind and lifestyle, then something that is really helpful is to have a Vaccinator medic. And again, I'll demonstrate this later, but you have a Vaccinator medic, right? And what you have them do is give you something like bullet resistance, which means your man counters, sniper headshots, minis, sentry guns, heavies basically deal no damage to you. And remember, with Vaccinator, it latches on for a bit. It remains on you. So what you'll do is you have the medic use Vaccinator on you, bullet res, as you're jumping. Like, okay, so right pretty much as you launch the second phase of your jump, you have that little first initial tick, and then the second one sends you further in. With the second one, right as that activates, you want your medic to vaccinate you, and then you have a really solid opportunity to initiate, and at the very least, airblast a heavy out of position. And again, the thermal thruster is unrivaled when it comes to repositioning yourself and making the enemy players out of position and capitalizing off that. It is so damn good. I think that'll be about it for this sort of like preliminary principle section. Again, sorry if that's a little long-winded for your takes or isn't as insightful as you'd like it to be. The specific examples will be much more visual in demonstration. And I will cut that in soon. Into the technique session, and I will say I pre-recorded most of these. I want to have the majority of my mental energy just be directed towards getting these plays off themselves, and I'm going to go and try and look back and put the best context in mind into them. I think it's just like kind of hard to accurately commentate over it when you're specifically trying to go for jumps. So for here you see just the sort of benefit of being very decisive with your jumps and commitment, of leapfrogging, and then of just reeling your movement in a little bit, and just nullifying your own movements so that you don't go that far beyond and you land right onto your target. And for that it's just like you tap W and S at the same time or whatever combination of movement keys. And then after getting that initial jump off, like landing right in the middle of the enemy team and directly targeting one person down, basically what you see is just backburning everybody. People are so out of possession, people don't know how to react, and you just flame them all down in quick succession while they're taking other fights. You try that with the Dragon's Fury, and you can get good single targeting there, but you're not going to be able to kill that many people at once. So, I mean, it's just like, you dive straight in, it's Overwatch, what else can I say? For this one, I see, so I'm planning out my jump right. I'm going more towards the front lines, but then I see an enemy combo coming up. I see a scout going forward ahead of the rest of this team. I surf the Demoman's damage with a little bit of extra knockback, and I land right between the scout and the rest of his team, and that's a free for my team. And just that sort of hyper-opportunistic playstyle has really benefited from the Backburner. And then I just kind of wrap it off by getting some backburn damage. This is just a little demonstration of all the air spinning you can do, of all the movement control you have. So here I bounce myself off a wall, and that provides me a really nice and natural curve to land right onto this. It's like, you don't really need to worry about your jumps being that good, it's all about just having fun and being fancy. And that can be beneficial, though, just in environments where you really do need that little bit of extra air control. Just try spinning, experiment a little bit, have some fun, be unpredictable. So here I see an enemy overcharge being used. So what I do is I back up a little bit, and I just sort of think, how can I sort of help my team deal with this supercharge? My heavy's losing the fight, they still have a bit of supercharge left. So what I think to myself to do is to curve around this, have a nice natural jump, and then use that little wall to bounce the medic off of and send him flying further away from the heavy. And in doing so, I use the jetpack to help isolate a target. I still have the ability to rapidly airblast, and so I'm able to physically outposition the enemy team. Here I'm just trying to be fancy and do a backwards jetpack jump, you know. Don't choreograph it at all. I see I get denied by a sentry gun nest though. So what I decide to do here is just back up a little bit, and hey look, there's a spy with the Backburner. You can spy check like crazy. If you hit them in the back for like half a second, they're instantly dead. That's another benefit over the thermal thruster. Anyways, I know for the Dragon's Fury. God, I'm so smart. So I know that gun nest is there, and so what I'm preparing to do here is a little bit ballsy, but I just use this wall as cover for a bit. I wait for the gun rockets to be shot my way, and then once those gun rockets are shot at me, what I do is I just send them right back at the enemy center of mass, and what I do is I kill a medic and I think a soldier, that are two medics, just by purely reflecting the rockets at them there. Let's see. Yeah, I killed two enemy medics just because I'm able to just know that there's something there and I'm able to use that in fact to my advantage. I have a goal in mind there, and so I'm able to realize it with the assistance of the thermal thruster and backburner. And you can really do that with any flamethrower there, but the thermal thruster is really what allows you to capitalize off of it. And it's just like, you want to be super opportunistic and just constantly try and have high tempo plays and get in with the thermal thruster and especially backburner. So here, I'm trying to do the same thing mostly, but now I notice that there's only one sentry gun, so what I do is I land on top of the sentry gun, I sort of spiral around it, and again, you just have a very fluid and circular movement pattern, and that sort of little pattern of movement and strafing is what allows you to really avoid sentry guns if they're on their own and just kill them just like that. So here, I take a fight with a soldier. I'm in an enclosed space. He's using a shotgun. If I go straight into the open and try and jump away, he's just going to shoot me. So what I do is I duck to the side for cover instead. And then I'm jumping past him from that point on. Do a little bit of a spin, and boom, safely out of there. Nothing really interesting beyond that point. Here I'm using the wall, this little like roof as cover, so the enemy team isn't seeing me straight going in. I use my momentum as I'm landing to airblast the pyro further back, and now that I have the high ground in a position behind the enemy team, I'm able to just basically insta-kill their pyro and come on point, make some space, and kill a scout as well. And what you really want to be looking for with the backburner and thermal thruster is when you're making a jump, you just want to find yourself in a position right where you're behind the enemy team so you split their attention, instead of just directly trying to go into them and Goomba them or just draw their aggression. You want to land behind them, you want to cause chaos in the enemy team, and you just want to be able to get as much burst damage as possible. Here I see there's a sniper and demoman on the roof, so what I do, I curve to the side, I do a circular motion, and now that I have the momentum of landing with the thermal thruster, I'm able to send them up and far away. You can sort of do that with detonator, but chances of you dying to sniper are a lot higher just while you're getting into a good position. Whereas with the thermal thruster, if you do a bad jump, you're dying. If you have good movement, though, and you do a good curve, then it's much harder for the sniper to deal with you, and you're in a really good position if there's any enemies on roofs to just shunt them off, and you really just want to use the roofs, use high ground, and just manipulate, make the enemy team have to give up their high ground, basically. You are such like a physical object there compared to any other sort of loadout. And that's really one of the main benefits of it. So here, I start taking a fight with the heavy and medic combo, and it's just like, I don't initially have the opportunity to see them, so I'm just going to start walking right. I shove them back a little bit, still have most of my ammo left, and then I'm thinking to myself, how do I initiate in this case, right? So what I'm going to do here is, I'm just going to like start spinning around a lot, and go for a very wide curve, and just sort of try and land right behind the enemy medic. And I don't care if I die there, it means the enemy medic's dying as well. I'm able to use the roof as cover there to achieve that, along with just inconsistent but fluid mouse movements. Here I'm just, again, you dive right into the center of the enemy team, the medic has no real good way to back out, and now you're just causing a ton of chaos. You don't need to worry about singular targets, and you just sort of deathball all over them off of any existing chaos. As you can see here, you have very fluid mouse movements, and you just want to constantly be moving your mouse around, constantly find the right positioning. And that's something that, again, the Backburner really benefits from, because you always want to be landing behind people to get those criticals. So here, I see they have an Uber charge going up, so what do? I land with the thermal thruster and Backburner, I use an airblast, and that heavy goes, again, pitted against a wall high into the corner. Here, I have a jump planned out already as I'm rolling out from spawn, and that's sort of what I mean by a visualization, right? And I see there's a heavy up here. The heavy thinks I'm going far over him, or just loses track of me, and instead I land behind him. Now, he really should be getting backburnered crit here, but actually a really nice benefit of the thermal thruster and the knockback on landing is that it shoves enemies around, so I don't have to waste my ammo on an airblast there, and I'm able to dive into him, and because I have extra knockback from damage, basically any enemy players are your friends in the sense that you can use them to manipulate your own positioning. Look at this here. Look, that one little bit of damage, you go flying way up. And again, you'll notice Thundermound's really good for it. Maps with a lot of verticality are good. And here you see, I do overshoot a little bit. I stall my movement. I pit myself against a wall. I bait the sniper's Gerardio. I airblast him while I'm in the middle of flaming him. And again, you have like a very fluid sense of motion. You always want that inertia and momentum. And that's the big benefit of the Backburner compared to the Dragon's Fury. And then it's just like a quick 1-2-3 combo. I land behind the enemy Pyro. I don't actually get backburns, but I just commit from a weird angle and I kill their Pyro as a result. And it's like you get very positive trades there. Here, Backburner, get a nice jump. They're dead. If you use the Dragon Sphere, you have to line it up a lot more there. With the Backburner, you have really, really high multi-target damage potential. Now this one, it doesn't actually work out in execution, but you can just sort of see how I curve around, spin, and actually get the Goomba stomp onto the heavy. And just being able to realize your amount of air control can be very useful for situations where you actually do need like that little bit of extra damage, or where you just need to like commit from a different angle. You have so much air control, and you just want to constantly be experimenting with your movement, because if you don't, you're going to get very predictable. Here again, I'm using the high ground to my advantage. It's much harder for enemies to deal with up here. I stall my momentum, so I land right behind the enemy heavy. It doesn't work out, again, no teammates around, but it's just the principle of it. It's kind of like a spy drop stab in a way. Instead of going so much further, they do get knocked back a little bit, but you're still getting backburner crits while it's going on, even if it's just for a little bit. And it's just like, the more you refine that, the more successful you are, and the more you're going to get value off of it. The range is no concern, because you're using the thermal thruster to put you into the perfect engagement range for the backburner. It's a range tool, and so it doesn't really have a necessary need for like a ranged option such as the Dragon's Fury. So here, I'm jumping midair, I'm going to land high and above cart. You see I have a nice arc here. A Demoman actually jumps into me, and I bounce off of that Demoman's head. Completely unintentional, but it's just the sort of stuff you experience with the thermal thruster that you're basically going to experience on nothing else. And now I'm getting massive backburn crits onto the entire enemy team. Again, not all of these work out, but it's just really cool to see the sorts of possibilities that you can get. Okay, so an explanation for this one. In the past, I thought maybe quick fix mix would be most efficient, right? They follow you around. And it is kind of cool, but they don't follow you that well. And you can still instantly lose your medic or yourself to a headshot. So the main counter to snipers, headshot kill, insta-kill. Heavies, they shoot you out of the sky unless you can surf them up and outwards. Sentry guns, especially minis, and level 3s, you're not going to get that much versus them anyways. They still have their explosives. But just minis, they basically deal nothing to you. They have such low DPS, and you can just infinitely surf them upwards. See that? Look at how high my health is, look at how little it goes, and my medic is able to just leave a Vaccinator charge on me, even if they are unable to physically follow me. And that's the main benefit of it of the Vaccinator, just getting a Vaccinator to use, like, especially as you're at the second stage of jump. So you have that initial one where it's like you get launched upwards, and then you have the second one, which is actually what sends you forward. And if you get it right as you're about to launch from the second one, you have a few seconds of time where you just can't be headshot, and you can't be basically dealt with at all by any player. You're not really getting hit by soldiers, and if you are getting shot by projectiles, you can just reflect. Here, again, I land behind that enemy medic. It's a common angle. I know they're going to be walking out of that spawn door. I cause a lot of chaos. I ruin their positioning. I airblast them around a little bit. And it's like, I have a very decisive and rapid flow of motion, where it's like, it's all naturally synergizing. I circle around a lot. I airblast around to buy time as the Vaccinator wears off. And look at this. The heavy's basically just dealing nothing to me. I ruin his positioning there, get afterburn on him, distract him for the rest of my team. And because I have the Vaccinator on, which lasts for like a decent little bit after you don't have beam on you, because your medic's not always going to be able to follow you around, you just have so much more staying power. Like, you can literally just bomb and bot for snipers, right? And it's actually super insane. Here again, I get another bullet resistance. I'm diving into the entire enemy team. And if your medic's beaming, you go damage positive there. If not, you just don't take that much damage in general. I'll do a little bit of trolling here, of course. But then I believe this one is probably going to show just like the benefits of the Vaccinator yet again. Yeah, there's a heavy over here. Again, I'm not aiming to kill him there. I'm just aiming to launch him off and ruin his positioning so my team can commit to the fight better. And it's like, viewing it that way, you have a really supportive role on the team as a pyro, even with the backburner and jetpack, or whatever flamethrower you want to use, because you are in such a good position to deny enemy positioning and movement from any angle. So here, I'm thinking, okay, I'll try and kill this flog pyro with a backburn. I see the medic's about to die though with the health, so I kind of stall my movement and stop myself. And instead I just dive onto card instead, which the enemy team isn't expecting. They think I'm going for the pyro as well. And I'm able to just manipulate their conception of what I'm going to be doing to my advantage. And you're able to just use it to escape. You don't really get that sort of get out of jail free card with the detonator, or the ability to just rapidly commit to basically anything. It's quite cool. Here again, I get another bullet resistance. I'm sacking for the enemy team's medic. I get that enemy team's medic. The engineer turns back for my medic because they do that. I get an insta-kill on them. Here, let's see. I think this is just going to show the sheer mobility you have with the thermal thruster. But then also, you could just literally land right next to people, keep flaming them, and basically get them to kill themselves on you. Now this one, it's just showing you how fast you can go and how you can surf off of basically any damage source again. There's a sentry gun shooting at me. Again, this doesn't work out, but it's really cool to see just how much momentum you can get. This is a good old backwards jetpack jump. And you'll see, even with the jump being backwards, I've practiced it a lot. I know the angles, and it doesn't really matter so much. It makes it hard for the enemy team to predict. I land on the medic's head, and right as I'm about to do that, it's possible I would have trimmed off the medic's head as well, but the enemy pyro airblasts me, although it does look a little bit odd on the screen. And look at my momentum now. I get sent further upwards to the side while I'm getting hit by the sentry gun. I do actually die in this clip, but I just have it cut off for the sake of convenience. And it's just anything the enemy team does is an opportunity for you to capitalize off of. And that's what makes it so perfect for casual, because they're just... It's so easy to punish the enemy team for basically doing anything against you, and it's always such high, like, tempo, such straight endorphin release, basically, with any given play, because even if it doesn't work out, you just go absolutely orbital at any given opportunity, and it's great. Here, I'm just diving in for a quick enemy kill. I get the kill, I dive out, I don't need to commit and line up a second shot because I'm on the backburner. Here, you see a nice jump arc. There's cover. Wish I could be a bit more precise, whatever. So yeah, you see here, I'm initiating from a nice low angle of cover. The enemy team physically can't hit me for a while. I almost get a Goomba, but even though there is knockback from it, it actually works from landing with the thermal thruster. It works to my advantage because it splits the enemy team off. It forces their players to mix between going forward and behind. And then it also naturally knocks enemies into a position where they are like thrown to be looking behind them, so you can just backburn them a lot of the time. Again, you land in the middle of the enemy team, you have the ability to keep flaming while you're airblasting, and then you just get a lot of really high tempo random chaos plays like that. Here, this isn't necessarily like, this isn't due to the thermal thruster directly at all, but it's just like, it goes to show you the sort of playstyle you can have with this, and the sort of strength of it all. You just rapidly rotate around everywhere. You want to be using the power jack, you want to have such high mobility. Back to the thermal thruster itself, though, you see I can stop myself right in front of the sniper. If they're better, I'd probably get headshot there, but it's kind of just fancy, like a little bit of a show-off. You just stop yourself on the railing, and now I'm behind the enemy team, and I get to backburn them for pretty high damage, although my team doesn't follow up on it. Here, I'm just sort of doing that again. It's a really good angle to initiate from because there's a lot of cover and means for you to disengage. The enemy sniper isn't looking towards me as I get out, and again, I'm able to backburn, I'm able to jump off the dispenser and use my terrain to my advantage, and then just surf damage out. Here you can see I bounce myself off of a wall. Believe so anyways. Yeah, I bounce myself off that little, like, wood just barely, and then that sort of sends me downwards. And I'm initially just jumping in there, like going for a bit of a wide jump, trying to land on the enemies, but there's no enemies there, so it's just like I want to stall my momentum, avoid landing too far behind enemy lines, and then just get a bit more of a curve going. And it's really cool to just be able to be like, okay, I can use this terrain this way. Here, though, I see the enemy demo is kind of unaware. There's an Uber exchange going on. The enemy demo tries to turn away, and I'm able to exploit his preconceived notion of like what to do in a given case to just insta-kill with the Backburner, whereas with the Dragon Sphere, you're not really as preying off of the enemy team being manipulatable as much, and the Thermal Thruster is all about, and I mean like 100% about manipulating the encounters you find yourself in. You go flying everywhere, you take 60% extra more knockback passively, no extra damage, you can actually really help alleviate damage unless you just get stuck in the air, and then you can just keep jumping around as a result. And again, not as great for competitive, really good for casual. Another reason to be using Backburner with the jetpack there, though, instead of Dragon's Fury, is just being able to do rapid airblasts like that and have a very natural and fluid motion. Just keep flaming, just keep airblasting, it really throws enemies off, whereas with the Dragon's Fury, you're physically handicapping yourself when it comes to how much you could do. Here, I'm relatively trying to roll out. I do glimpse the Pyro, mainly due to the domination, though, and the enemy Pyro is thinking I'm rolling out as well. I honestly shouldn't be flaming here, but because I'm able to just get like a half second of criticals from behind, they just die. Now, here I'm going to be showing you a little bit of the real downside of running the Dragon's Fury with this set, right? So take a look at these jumps. You see how it's kind of circular anyways. If I was on Backburner, this Pyro gets backburned. I can keep airblasting him off for a few times, grab more ammo. But because I'm on the Dragon's Fury, my airblasting is so hampered, and third basically just becomes a nightmare unless you get perfect airblasts, which you aren't really paying attention to all the time. With the Thermal Thruster, you're paying attention to the jumps themselves. And you just physically can't airblast enough. Like, even keeping in mind that you can only do 4 airblasts with a Backburner, if you're smart with it, it's manageable with your bombs. You can always just be getting more ammo, managing it well. It's really punishing if you do it poorly, but it enables you to still have a lot of impact. With the Dragon's Fury here, though, it's like, I could either be trying to WM1 them down here, which maybe in all fairness could work, but on third here, you really want to be landing on the cart and air blasting them all away, and I just physically cannot be doing that with the Dragon's Fury. I get, like, nothing air blasted off there. You see it again here, the enemy team is more clustered up. I can sort of airblast them, but there is no real momentum behind it. You're not taking advantage of the momentum from the Thermal Thruster, and so any of your airblasts just end up not really going as far, and it's really awkward there. It's like, take a look at this, right? Just inspect this with me. So this jump, you land around, there's a big circle here. I do get pelted by the mini, so I can't really get an actual strafe off or like circle around for the Backburner. But then you see how that enemy team is sort of naturally turning around anyways, just in reaction to the Pyro landing next to them, in reaction to the low of knockback, it would be really effective. And alternatively, even disregarding the Backburner's crits itself, I would have a functional airblast here, and I would have full ammo because I'm committing to the engagement as I'm spawning there. Here you can see, again, you land right onto an enemy, you don't worry about the knockback, you send enemies upwards, and then you can backburn them really easily. It's just such synergy, it all flows super well. I think the Dragon's Fury maybe works better in theory with it, but on execution, the Backburner is just so ideal. You're a total gremlin. Here, again, I have the ability to keep flaming and airblasting. I can airblast in quick succession, and I'm able to use the momentum from the Thermal Thruster from being launched in to just entirely ruin the soldier's positioning and send them all the way out. Maybe not the most effective, but really funny. And funny is what's important. Here again, even if they get launched from the Thermal Thruster, it honestly works out to your favor because it means if it's a sniper, they're not able to aim at you nearly as effectively, and half the time you get crits on them anyways, so it's like, you might as well. Here, okay. So, I could just jump straight into them over the Conquer, right? But then I get totally murdered. So what I do is, I jump. This is one of the best sorts of jumps you can do. You go super high, you strafe wide to the side, like you hold A, you aim leftwards for a little bit, and so you have a very circular motion. You land behind, you get a few moments of backburning. You're not always going to get Ubered on there, but you're landing right into the enemy team. And because it's from an angle where they can't see you initially, because you're not choreographing it, because you're not getting detected until you're already in range, it synergizes really well, and you're able to cause just so much burst chaos. And again, you just use your height to your surroundings. It really is a rewarding and fun thing to be able to do. See here? One jump. I immediately have my next jump planned. Curve in, get backburns, get a lot of kills. Boom. Very successful. Now you'll see just the sheer extent of chaos I'm able to capitalize off of. Again, I'm able to keep flaming, keep airblasting at a very rapid rate. I still have good ammo. I'm able to chase the medics. One medic turns away. I use the power deck to close the distance just a little bit, and I get backburn crits on them. Very effective here. Again, backburner crit, not even intentional. Just it's the psychology of how the enemy players react. That's the main thing here. This pyro, I want to catch their pyro out, so instead of going right into them, I make them think I'm not going to go straight into them by sort of stalling my jump midair. There's a lot of really fancy stuff you can do, and it's really cool to see. So it's like that pyros think I'm going further past there. Because they think I'm going further past, I can just safely dive onto them and just land right onto them, basically. Here, again, I have a jump planned out. I'm thinking the enemy team's on the cart. They aren't on the cart there, but just look at how fluid that is. Now this one I actually do get a lot done. You'll see it's a pretty big kill chain. So what I'm doing here is I get behind the enemy backline, and now that I'm behind them and I'm in the perfect territory to use the backburner, I land next to their sniper. Because of the sort of angle I'm landing next to the sniper at, they don't really get blasted back to the side. Even if they do get knockbacked, they get pitted into a corner, and that works out way more to my advantage than theirs. And now that I'm in this position, I'm just causing so much chaos here. Use the backburner jetpack to recommit, get backburns on players, instantly kill them, keep your target, focus on the bigger picture and on your next movement, while you're just sort of naturally chaining kills together. And that's what I sort of mean by the motion. You just always keep the momentum going, the inertia going, but then if you use the Dragon's Fury, that whole sort of synchronized chain is just broken, and you can't focus on either the Dragon's Fury or the thermal thruster as effectively. You want to be flowing like water, essentially. This really do be TF2 philosophy. And that's honestly like the biggest misconception I'd say there is, at least from a casual standpoint. And again, land right behind enemy is really good. You just constantly mobile, constantly repositioning, and finding yourself committing to different angles and using that, like, any terrain to your advantage. So here I'm thinking, I'm rolling out. I start a jump. I want to jump to the right side there. I do see that there's a heavy. He's distracted. I see that he starts turning back though, so what I do is I hold W and S at the same time. I cancel my movement, and because I cancel my movement, I don't launch myself further in, and I don't die. It's like, you really gotta have awareness and game sense of what the enemy team is gonna do. And instead, I recommit from this flank instead to get backburner crits. I will say it doesn't work out. The heavy's eating a sandwich, and by the time I get there, he finishes eating. But it's just, on principle, it's pretty good, yeah. Here, I jump deep behind, I land in, and it's just like, you use that cover to your advantage. The enemy team thinks you're doing something else or that you're just going behind, but then you recommit. And because you don't need to recommit from any terrain as much, like, because you're not bound to the low ground for the sorcery jumps compared to something like Detonator or Soldier, or like just walls, rather you use roofs as your main source, which is very unique, I might add, then you just constantly weave your way in and out of engagements. And it's just like, bam, perfect spot to land criticals in. I don't quite get this demo, man, but it's funny nonetheless. I do actually run out of ammo. I mistime my airblasts. But in general, you can just sort of see the case for it there. Now, I do have a few more examples. Let me pull them up. So this Highlander Scrim Advanced tryouts in the preseason, you'll see I'm on the jetpack backburner. Okay, so the reasoning for this, there are 0 seconds left on the point timer, which means it is going to be very inherently chaotic, and I want to just commit to the fight. We're thinking maybe we'll do a sack, but in general, we just want to aggress. And I'm like, okay, I'm spawning on this loadout, and I'm just gonna bomb in and commit. So I used rock as a bit of cover. I land behind the enemy medic, force them with instant backburner crits, jump onto their grass, start dealing with their soldier. Again, I am getting a little punished for mistiming the airblasts, but regardless, because I'm able to chain the airblasting and the flaming together, it's still a constant source of ticking. And I don't have the afterburn penalty of the degracer. So I kill the NG, I'm thinking, maybe I'll kill the mini. I'm very panicked at this point, but then I realize, wait, I can surf the mini in. So I pull on my power jack for a bit for just a second of mobility. I don't want the damage vulnerability to be on for too long. So what I do is I just surf it into the sniper instead, land naturally behind them with confirmed criticals. The medic turns away main and dies to the confirmed criticals. It's pretty good. This is just a quick little showcase of it in 6v6. Whoops, forgot to turn the audio off. Don't want it getting in the way. So here we're doing a forward hold on. I'm like, okay, if I'm playing forward here as Pyro, the enemy team physically can't rely on their soldiers to deal with me. I still have 4 airblasts, and either way, I have basically 4 more as well from the ammo packs, so the soldiers are invalidated. And you'll see, especially if there's a sniper, you can deal with that. Or if there's scouts, you can still just kind of be jumping around the house. Again, you're using that cover. I do slightly miss the angle. I don't land quite onto the roof, but I'm still landing right behind enemies, even though I'm not getting confirmed back. Even though I'm not getting the backburner hits there, it's just like it's in principle. And I'm behind that enemy team. Enemy scout goes to face me, and they just sort of get flamed down as well. They lose the MG. And it's just like you want to be constantly recommitting, finding new angles to commit from, and just making yourself unpredictable. Now it's like, again, in competitive, it's a lot more nuanced. You don't want to be doing it, especially if you're not able to visualize it as well, or like when you're spawning, if you're not able to tell yourself, I'm going to be using it for this purpose. This is how I'm going to be using it, because the longer you stay on a jetpack in competitive, the more chances there are, at least in Highlander, of them just having their spy caller on it, and then the enemy team knows that because you're on the jetpack, you have to be going for some of those plays in order to get value, because in competitive, in comparison to casual, you really need something like the detonator, just any secondary play off of, in order to actually function as a pyre, because there's not always just going to be a ton of chaos for you to exploit your bait and your combo a lot of the time. And again, just much more nuanced, but it is important to note that there are certainly times where it is effective, because you can just manipulate the enemy players and use your terrain to your advantage. Now this is sort of something that I was experimenting with. Again, like, this is a pug, of course, so it's not that serious. This isn't a scrim. But you see, I get the enemy's medic forced, a pyro's chasing my medic. The quick fix launches my medic up with me from the initial thermal thruster jump, and their pyro airblasts them, so my medic gets launched safely to the roof. No, this isn't something you're going to find to be valuable, but it's just sort of a cool thing where it's like, whoa, that exists. Now, I think this one might be my personal favorite. Here, I'm just like, medic main harem. Look at this, though. Look at that. Tell me that isn't the most amazing thing you've ever seen. But again, as cool as it is, I've tested out. Vaccinator just feels much more effective because sometimes the medics don't get launched well with you. And then I think there probably will be one more example I want to bring up real quick. And this is a Highlander scrim versus a team that got second place for a long time. Again, you won't necessarily find success in this yourself, but it's just like cool to be like, okay, there is actually a use case for it. I will say I think it is very, very niche on Swiftwater here. It's just I know this team sort of struggles under pressure and aggression, and they're down Pyro here because their Pyro dies in tunnel, so I'm like, I might as well. There's no Pyro to airblast me back if I try and go through. So what I do is I airblast it back, I'm on low ammo, whatever, there's ammo on the low ground. So what I do here is, they're using on my soldier, we're doing like a bit of a sack and a airber. I get a flash from my medic, I drop down, now I'm on the low ground, I grab the ammo, I see that enemy sniper running away. My soldier dies to the engineer, but we have a dual bomb, so it's like, I surf around a little bit, I walk around, the engineer dies, I kill the sniper too, and then I'm looking to recommit from a different angle, I'm looking to get out. I hear the medic's called an upper, and I just land in the perfect position behind the enemy medic to backburn kill them. Again, they do get launched a little bit from the jump, or maybe not even in this case, it's very inconsistent. But regardless, if they did get launched, it would be right into that wall and puts them in the perfect position to get backburned. And yeah, I think that's going to be about it. Again, there's a lot of tech you can use, and it's very fun to just practice it in casual. I definitely recommend it. It's great. Try it out. Good weapon.